political correspondent for The Sun, and Bethany Dawson from the London reporter at Politico. Guys, thanks very much for being with us, and happy Sunday to you both. Let's get straight on, and we're going to start with the Sunday Telegraph, Martina, aren't we? And this is following on from that meeting of the four leaders in Ukraine.
That's right, and we got the picture of Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron and Volodymyr Zelensky in Kyiv. It follows a meeting where the leaders of Germany, France, Poland, the UK obviously had a phone call with President Trump and the Coalition of the Willing, so 20 members, and they basically threatened to send more weapons to Ukraine if Vladimir Putin does not agree to a 30-day ceasefire. Now, it's quite significant. It's the first time the four leaders have met in Kyiv. There's been a bit of a stall in the last few months. You know, there was quite a lot of momentum with Keir Starmer announcing the Coalition of the Willing with Emmanuel Macron. And then for months, you know, the news agenda has been taken over by Donald Trump with his tariffs, and nothing really has been done. So now we're going to have to see. Putin has responded to this saying that he will think it through. He's also proposed direct negotiations at a meeting on Thursday. But we'll have to see. You know, nothing has been done in the last few months, and we'll have to see if Putin
It does feel like it's ticking on a bit, though, now. I mean, you know, those things didn't have to be said by Putin in that late-night news conference that they were going to hold the meeting. Whether you can trust him at his word, though, is the thing, isn't it?
Yeah, think it through isn't necessarily the most sort of reassuring terminology, but it is acknowledging that these discussions are happening and that the pressure is being placed. It's showing the impact of this Coalition of the Willing set up by Keir Starmer that everybody wasn't really sure what to do with when it was announced, because this hadn't really been done before. Starmer was pitching himself as the bridge between Europe and the United States, and at least with this meeting, it does look like that bridge of communication is being built.
Yeah, I mean, he dialed in.
Yeah, but there's still so many questions because, for example, Emmanuel Macron said that the US will monitor this agreement, this 30-day ceasefire. We haven't really heard that from the US side. And also, there's still lots of questions on the Coalition of the Willing and whether Emmanuel Macron says troops will be there to monitor this ceasefire. But we don't know which countries. You know, so far we only know that the UK and France have said, yes, we'll put troops on the ground, boots on the ground. The other 20 members, they're part of this Coalition of the Willing. We don't know. We don't know.
Poland has sort of said directly that they will not send troops, and Donald Tusk was there talking. So.
Absolutely, and we know that there's lots of countries like Italy. Giorgia Meloni was at a meeting in Lancaster House a couple of months ago, and she said there's absolutely no way that we're going to send soldiers there. So,
but I suppose the thing that's come out of this as well is the threat that if this agreement's not agreed to by Putin, they're going to flood Ukraine with ammunition.
Sorry, just quickly to say, I'm just surprised that not enough. Like, there's still some stuff that the countries can do, and sanctions have not been applied already. So
you would have thought that they would ratchet up the sanctions to the very max, but I suppose you did have to leave yourself wiggle room at the end of it. I don't know. I mean, you would have thought that if you invade a neighbour, you're going to be punished to the full extent that you can punish someone. Yeah,
I guess it's how much more they want to dial it up, but there's a question of sort of what more can happen for more sanctions to be put in place, for more threats to be done. And I wonder if it is something like not observing a ceasefire that is when we'll see those pressures ramp up even higher.
It's the other thing that Trump had threatened as well to increase the sanctions. So I guess there is more that they can turn the dial on, but we will see. All right, let's stay with the front of the Telegraph, guys. And Bethany, you're going to take us through this story. It's also a story that we're reporting today. We've got Yvette Cooper on with Trevor Phillips at 8:30. This is about immigration.
Yes, the immigration white paper is coming out tomorrow. It'll be the big story, I think, for the first half of next week, and certainly it's big story today. The government's plan to, as they put it, tackle migration, and a big part of that, according to the front of the Sunday Telegraph, is that they're going to be raising the bar for skilled migrants to come into the UK. So Boris Johnson changed the immigration system in 2021. It used to be that you'd need a certain level of qualifications to come to the UK. Johnson changed it to a points-based system, and now it looks like Yvette Cooper is going to change it back. So they'll need degrees for these industries. The only exception, however, is in critical sectors where there are shortages of workers, and that will remain a points points-based system to continue supporting those industries. One of the really interesting factors, I think, about this paper, though, is that employers will, if they're not being seen to still be trying to get domestic labour, they're not supporting domestic industries, they might get their right to have foreign workers sponsor foreign visas stripped from them. So the government is really pressing hard on industries, even when they do have a significant proportion of international workers propping up the sector. They will still fight really hard. The government will still fight really hard to have British workers get those jobs as well.
I mean, it's interesting if they're stepping away from this. Everyone will remember the long memory Australian-style points-based system that they're now throwing back on, right? But this always runs up against attention because even in the government's press release, Yvette Cooper claims that by reducing the numbers, they can improve economic growth. But there is a tension there because you need people to fill the jobs to improve economic growth.
Absolutely, and there's also, you know, in the last few weeks, there's been a lot of pushback for this immigration white paper, which is coming out tomorrow, from other departments. For instance, the Department of Education, because we know that universities are incredibly reliant on foreign students or on international students, and they warned that they will go bankrupt if the number of international students go down. So it's really difficult, but we know that the reason, like the Home Office believes that if net migration does not go down, and last year it was almost 1 million, and we remember in 2010 David Cameron promising that we'd go into the tens of thousands. So the numbers have trebled under the Conservatives. But anyway, the Home Office believes if the numbers do not go down, Labour's got no chance of winning the next election. And this is a response to the reform surge, local elections last week. And it's interesting, so we've got the other front page of the Mail on Sunday. And the reason why we've got so many, you know, front pages talking about immigration is because, of course, the Home Office has given little bits of the immigration white paper to different newspapers. And this one in particular, there's lots of things that are going to come out tomorrow, but this one is that if migrants commit a crime, they will be kicked out, they will be deported immediately. So far, it's only if you commit a crime, like if you are behind bars for a year, you face deportation.
And is it back to the home country? Is it to a third country? Is that clear?
To their home countries.
Right.
What happens to those that can't return to their home countries is a different question, and a question that the Labour government hasn't been able to answer. Of course, we know that they're exploring different ideas. Obviously, the Rwanda scheme is a deportation scheme. They've said that they're not bringing it back, but they're looking at stuff like the Albania deal that the Italian government looked at, and of course it failed because of their issues with the judges over there. Tomorrow it will be big, and it will be interesting to see Yvette Cooper on the morning round today and what she's got to say. But it's a fight. It's a fight against reform.
It definitely is. I'm sure Trevor will ask her about this. I mean, this is pretty punchy from a Labour government.
It is really punchy, and I think there is, the Mail has a line here that this is amid panic over the reform surge. I think this slightly predates the reform surge in the local government. When it was the general elections last year, I visited a lot of seaside constituencies which were impacted by small boats crossings. Many won for the first time, or for the first time in a long time, by a Labour MP. And this is still appealing to those communities who are affected in quite a different way from other parts in the countries by this sort of migrant crossing, by these kind of crimes. And I think it is to show these communities that lended Labour their support, often for the first time, that they kind of are on their side. Of course, this is as well going to be, you know, received gleefully by people who are supporting reform at the moment. They want to see foreign criminals deported, and it is what the Labour government is saying they're doing. I think one of the interesting things about kind of briefing a story like this, giving different lines to different papers before we actually have the white paper, is there are so many questions, and I think people are going to be maybe really happy, they're maybe going to be very angry about some of the details, but fundamentally they're not going to have the answers. There are going to be things that Yvette Cooper isn't able to say today on the morning round, and I think it's a risky strategy.
It's a difficult sequencing that they've decided to go with here, because there are holes, as we've already pointed out around this table, in what we've been told thus far, and we're not going to Parliament won't find out. But I suppose that's the process. You've got to go to Parliament first, because if they didn't, we'd be getting told in Parliament by the Speaker. All right, let's move on to the next story. We haven't got loads of time left, and this is one on the front page of the Sunday Times.
Still on immigration, I think.
Yeah. Go ahead. Who is it? Martine. It's Bethany.
Oh, no, sorry.
So this is the Supermax prisons. The National Chair of the Prison Officers Association is calling for American-style Supermax prisons for the worst offenders. This comes after a slew of quite horrible headlines about attacks in prisons on guards. One, for example, Hashem Abedi attacked officers with boiling water and oil. This kind of senior guard is calling for Supermax prisons. These are not nice places to be, right? You are locked in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day. And I think there's quite an interesting in the resources that are to the criminal justice system and to our prisons, and this request that you can see the rationale behind, right? Protecting guards and indeed protecting other prisoners. But there's been a 12% fall in budgets for prisons between 2007 and 8 to now. So there's this really difficult issue of maybe there does need to be a sort of strengthening of our prison system, but where on earth is the money going to come from?
We're waiting for the Gork review to come through, which is going to look at how many people get sent to prison. But let's not forget that we've had prisoners released early because there aren't enough prison places, so we're not building enough spaces. Supermax may not be the priority for the government.
Absolutely, and that was one of the first things that the Labour government had to do, that they inherited from the Conservatives. And as you mentioned, David Gork, former Conservative cabinet minister, is conducting his sentencing review. And it will be really interesting because it will mean fewer people get sentenced, possibly, because there's not enough spaces, as you say. The Labour government has promised to build more prisons, but there's just simply isn't enough money and spaces. So I think it will be the next headache for the Labour government for sure, because they say they're going to be tough on crime and tough on the causes of crime, but the crisis in our prisons is pretty blatant,
Yeah, and it becomes a really obvious thing for voters to see, especially when people are being let out of prison. All right, Martina, Bethany, thanks very much. Great talk. More from you next hour. Do appreciate it. Do stay with us here on the Breakfast programme, because we'll be back in the next hour of the programme with all of the day's top stories, including our exclusive reporting on a surgeon from Addenbrooke's who's been suspended because of concerns about her work. Stay with us.
Jubilation in the streets,